The massive hall buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from across the known galaxy gathered for what many believed would be humanity's final diplomatic meeting. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat perfectly still at the small table assigned to Earth's delegation, her dark eyes scanning the ornate chamber that housed the Galactic Council's emergency session. Above them, the dome ceiling displayed a real-time map of the galaxy, with thousands of star systems blinking in various colors to represent the different species and their territorial claims. The blue dots representing human colonies looked pitifully small compared to the vast swaths of red that marked the Zephyrian Empire's domain. Emperor Vexthal himself had come to deliver the ultimatum. The towering reptilian being stood nearly 3 meters tall, his scaled hide gleaming under the chamber's artificial lighting. His species had conquered 17 different civilizations over the past millennium, and their military might was legendary throughout the galaxy. When a Zephyrian fleet appeared in your system, surrender was usually the only option that prevented complete annihilation. The human species has exactly 72 standard hours to evacuate all colonies beyond their home system, Vexthal announced, his voice carrying easily across the vast chamber through universal translators. Any human presence detected outside the Sol system after this deadline will be considered an act of war against the Zephyrian Empire. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. The crystalline collective's representative made a sound like wind chimes in a storm, which their translator rendered as nervous laughter. The gas-based beings from the Nebula Consortium swirled anxiously in their containment suits, while the insectoid hive-mind delegates clicked their mandibles in what could have been either sympathy or anticipation. Ambassador Chen reached into her briefcase and withdrew a simple manila folder. The action was so mundane, so completely human, that several delegates actually turned to stare. In a galaxy where information was typically stored in quantum matrices or neural networks, the sight of actual paper was almost prehistoric. She opened the folder with deliberate care, her expression remaining perfectly neutral as she scanned the contents. Then, to the absolute amazement of everyone present, she smiled. It wasn't a nervous smile or a diplomatic gesture. It was the kind of smile that a chess master might give when their opponent finally made the move they'd been waiting for. The kind of smile that suggested someone had just played directly into a carefully laid trap. Emperor Vexthal's golden eyes narrowed. In his 1,000 years of conquest, he had never seen a species representative smile when faced with extinction. Fear, desperation, anger, even defiant rage he had witnessed countless times. But this calm satisfaction? This was entirely new. You find our ultimatum amusing, human? Vexthal's voice carried a dangerous edge. Sarah Chen looked up from her papers, that mysterious smile still playing at the corners of her mouth. Not amusing, Your Imperial Majesty. Just timely. She stood up, and the chamber fell completely silent. Even the constant background hum of the station's life support system seemed to quiet in anticipation. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of various classifications, Chen began, her voice clear and confident, I believe there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about humanity's position in galactic affairs. She walked around her table, still carrying the manila folder, and moved toward the center of the chamber. Her simple black business suit stood in stark contrast to the elaborate robes, environmental suits, and natural coverings worn by the other delegates. When humanity first made contact with galactic civilization 50 years ago, we were indeed the newcomers. A young species, barely able to travel between our nearest star systems, desperately eager to learn and find our place among the established powers. The Altarian delegate, a being that resembled a living tree with golden bark, rustled their leaves in what might have been agreement. They had been among the first to welcome humanity into the galactic community, offering trade agreements and cultural exchanges. We were grateful for the guidance, the technology sharing, the opportunity to establish colonies on worlds that more advanced species had deemed suitable for our physiology, Chen continued. We followed the established protocols, paid our tribute to the Council, and tried very hard to be good galactic citizens. Emperor Vexthal made a sound that the translators couldn't quite render, something between a growl and a laugh. And now you face the consequences of your species' rapid expansion. You have grown too quickly, claimed too many worlds. The established order must be maintained. Chen nodded thoughtfully. Yes, about that established order. Tell me, Your Imperial Majesty, when was the last time you actually reviewed humanity's current capabilities? The question seemed to catch Vexthal off guard. Your capabilities are well documented. Primitive fusion drives, basic energy weapons, simple AI systems. Your largest warships are barely frigate class by galactic standards. Documented when?
Chen asked. The most recent assessment was.
Vexthal paused, clearly accessing some internal database.
37 standard years ago. Chen's smile widened. 37 years. That's almost half of humanity's entire time in galactic society.
A lot can change in 37 years, especially for a species that you yourself just described as rapidly expanding. She opened the manila folder again and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The simple white document looked almost comical in the high-tech environment, like a stone tool displayed in a museum of advanced weapons. This, she said, holding up the paper, is a resignation letter. The chamber erupted in confused sounds from dozens of different species. The universal translators struggled to keep up as delegates demanded explanations in languages that ranged from subsonic rumbles to electromagnetic pulses.
Chen waited for the chaos to die down before continuing. Specifically, it's humanity's resignation from the Galactic Council, effective immediately.
We're also withdrawing from all trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, and mutual defense pacts.
The Zephyrian Emperor's crest flared in surprise. You cannot simply withdraw from galactic civilization.
Actually, we can, Chen replied calmly. Article 7 of the Galactic Charter clearly states that any member species may withdraw from Council participation at any time, provided they give formal notice.
This is that notice.
She placed the paper on a nearby podium, where the chamber's scanning systems immediately verified its authenticity and legal standing. The massive display above them updated in real time, showing humanity's status changing from active member to withdrawn. But this is impossible, sputtered the hegemony representative, a crystalline being whose faceted surface was flashing rapidly between colors. No species has ever voluntarily withdrawn from the Council. No species has ever been in our particular situation, Chen agreed.
You see, the thing about humans is that we're remarkably good at learning.
And we've had 50 years to learn from the best teachers in the galaxy.
She gestured toward the assembled delegates. The Altarians taught us stellar engineering and how to harvest energy from multiple star types. The Consortium showed us how to survive in hostile environments and extract resources from gas giants. The hive mind shared their knowledge of organic computing and biotechnology.
Emperor Vexthal was beginning to look distinctly uncomfortable.
Your point being?
My point being that humanity didn't just learn these technologies.
We improved them.
Chen's voice carried a note of pride that sent chills through several delegates who were finally beginning to understand the implications.
The fusion drives you mentioned?
We abandoned those 15 years ago in favor of antimatter propulsion systems that make our ships faster than anything currently in service with any galactic military. Those basic energy weapons have been replaced with quantum coherence beam arrays that can slice through the hull of a Zephyrian dreadnought like it's made of paper.
The Emperor's golden eyes widened. Impossible. We would have detected such developments.
Chen shook her head.
Would you?
All of our advanced research was conducted in deep space facilities, far from any galactic trade routes or monitoring stations.
And, since no one bothered to update their intelligence on humanity for 37 years, why would anyone think to look?
She turned to address the chamber as a whole. This is what happens when you underestimate a species simply because they're new to the galactic community.
Humans have a saying, give us an inch, and we'll take a mile.
Well, you gave us 50 years and access to the accumulated knowledge of dozens of advanced civilizations. The silence in the chamber was deafening.
Even the automated systems seemed to be holding their electronic breath.
So here's what's going to happen, Chen continued, her tone becoming businesslike. Humanity is withdrawing from all galactic institutions. We're recalling our ambassadors, closing our embassies, and terminating all formal relationships with every council species.
She looked directly at Emperor Vexthal.
As for your ultimatum about evacuating our colonies, we respectfully decline. Those worlds are now part of the Terran Federation, a completely independent political entity that exists outside the framework of galactic law.
You're declaring independence?
The Emperor's voice was barely controlled.
We're declaring that we never needed anyone's permission in the first place, Chen corrected.
Galactic law only applies to species that choose to participate in galactic civilization.
As of today, humanity chooses not to. The implications were staggering. For the first time in galactic history, a species was essentially declaring themselves to be outside the established order entirely. Not conquered, not destroyed, simply separate.
This means war, Vexthal growled.
Chen's smile returned, brighter than ever. Does it? According to what authority?
The Galactic Council can't authorize military action against a non-member species without violating their own charter. The Zephyrian Empire can't claim legitimate conquest of already inhabited worlds without Council approval, which they won't get because humanity is no longer subject to Council jurisdiction.
She closed the manila folder with a soft snap.
You wanted to force humanity back into our home system, Your Imperial Majesty. Instead, you've given us the perfect excuse to leave galactic civilization entirely and pursue our own destiny among the stars.
The Emperor was clearly struggling to process this unexpected turn of events.
His species had built their empire on the assumption that all spacefaring civilizations would inevitably become part of the galactic community, subject to its laws and limitations.
You cannot survive outside the galactic economy, he declared.
Your colonies depend on trade with other species for essential resources.
Did they? Chen asked innocently.
Or did we simply choose to participate in galactic trade because it was convenient and profitable? There's a difference between dependence and preference, Your Imperial Majesty. She began walking back toward her table, her job here essentially finished. Humanity has been stockpiling resources and developing closed-loop manufacturing systems for decades. Our colonies are completely self-sufficient and have been for quite some time. The chamber erupted again as delegates realized the full scope of what was happening. Humanity hadn't just withdrawn from galactic society, they had planned this withdrawal years in advance. Every trade agreement, every cultural exchange, every bit of shared technology had been part of a larger strategy to gain independence. Emperor Vexthal raised his voice above the chaos. Even if this legal maneuvering is valid, it changes nothing.
The Zephyrian Empire will still take your colonies by force.
Chen paused at her table and turned back to face him. For the first time since the meeting began, her expression became completely serious. Your Imperial Majesty, she said quietly, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife, I would strongly advise against that course of action. The way she said it, with complete calm and absolute certainty, sent a wave of unease through the assembled delegates. This wasn't a threat or a bluff. It was a simple statement of fact delivered with the confidence of someone who knew something that everyone else was about to learn.
Are you threatening the Zephyrian Empire? Vexthal demanded. I'm offering free advice, Chen replied. What you do with it is entirely up to you.
3 days after Ambassador Chen's shocking announcement, the first Zephyrian battle fleet arrived at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, home to New Geneva, one of humanity's most prosperous colonial worlds. Admiral Korthax commanded the fleet from his flagship, the Inevitable Conquest, a massive dreadnought that had been present at the subjugation of 14 different species. The admiral stood on his command bridge, studying the tactical displays with satisfaction. Intelligence reports indicated that New Geneva housed approximately 2 million human colonists, along with extensive mining operations and agricultural facilities. It would serve as an excellent example to the rest of humanity about the consequences of defying the Zephyrian Empire. Status report, Korthax commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never experienced defeat.
Long-range sensors detect standard human infrastructure, his tactical officer reported.
3 orbital habitats, 2 mining platforms, and a small defensive fleet consisting of 8 vessels.
Total estimated firepower is minimal. The admiral's mandibles clicked in amusement.
8 ships against his fleet of 47 warships, including 12 dreadnoughts. It would be a massacre so quick that it hardly qualified as a battle.
Open a communication channel to the planet, he ordered.
The main display showed the bridge of what appeared to be the human flagship, a sleek vessel that looked more like a luxury yacht than a warship.
A middle-aged human woman in a simple blue uniform faced the screen, her expression calm and professional. I am Admiral Korthax of the Zephyrian Empire, he announced. You are in violation of Imperial space. Surrender immediately and your deaths will be quick.
The human woman, who introduced herself as Commodore Martinez, tilted her head slightly.
Admiral, I'm afraid there's been some confusion. This is sovereign territory of the Terran Federation, which exists outside the jurisdiction of galactic law.
You have no authority here.
Korthax's crest flared in irritation. Your species' legal maneuvering is irrelevant.
Surrender now or face the consequences. I'm going to give you the same advice that Ambassador Chen offered Emperor Vexthal, Martinez replied calmly.
Leave this system immediately. Consider it a professional courtesy.
The sheer audacity of the statement left the admiral speechless for a moment.
8 human ships against 47 Zephyrian vessels, and this female was offering him advice?
You have 30 seconds to begin your surrender procedures, Korthax growled.
After that, we will open fire.
Very well, Martinez sighed. You were warned. She cut the communication, and Korthax turned to his weapons officer. Target their flagship.
Full barrage.
The inevitable conquest's primary weapons array charged up with a sound like rolling thunder. Particle beams, plasma cannons, and quantum torpedoes all locked onto the human vessel. It was enough firepower to vaporize a small moon.
Fire, the admiral commanded.
The weapons discharged in a brilliant display of destructive energy, streaking across space toward the human ship. Korthax watched with satisfaction as enough destructive power to level a continent converged on the single target. And then, something impossible happened.
The energy beams simply stopped.
Less than a kilometer from the human ship, every particle beam, every plasma bolt, every torpedo just froze in space as if they had hit an invisible wall.
What is that? Korthax demanded. His science officer was frantically working his console, running every scan available. Unknown, sir.
Some kind of energy barrier, but it's not reading as any known defensive technology.
The energy patterns are completely alien.
On the display, the frozen weapons fire began to move again. But, instead of continuing toward the human ship, it started turning around. Admiral, the tactical officer's voice cracked slightly, the weapons are reversing course.
They're coming back toward us.
Korthax felt a chill run down his spine as he watched his own devastating weapons array rotating in space to aim directly at his fleet.
Evasive maneuvers.
All ships scatter. But, the Zephyrian vessels, built for overwhelming firepower rather than agility, couldn't move fast enough. The redirected energy strikes slammed into 3 of his escort cruisers with precisely the same force that they had been fired with. The ships didn't just explode, they were completely vaporized, leaving nothing behind but expanding clouds of superheated plasma.
The human Commodore's face reappeared on the main screen. Admiral, you're shooting at yourself. I'd recommend stopping that. Impossible, Korthax whispered. What technology is this? Would you like the technical explanation? Martinez asked politely. Our scientists call it a quantum reflection field.
It analyzes incoming energy and creates a perfect mirror of the attack vector.
Essentially, anything you shoot at us hits you instead, with full force. The Admiral's mind raced through the implications. If the humans could reflect any attack, then conventional weapons were useless.
But surely there were limits.
Full fleet engagement, he roared.
Every ship, every weapon, continuous barrage. The response was immediate. 44 Zephyrian warships opened fire simultaneously, creating a wall of destructive energy that should have been capable of cracking a planet's crust. The combined firepower of the entire fleet streaked toward the 8 human ships.
And stopped, just as before.
But, this time, instead of simply reversing direction, something new happened. The frozen energy began to compress, condensing into increasingly dense packets of destruction.
The quantum reflection fields weren't just stopping the attacks, they were collecting them.
Sir, the science officer called out, his voice filled with terror, energy readings are off the charts.
Whatever they're doing, they're building up enough power to destroy our entire fleet.
Commodore Martinez's voice carried across the communication channel with the patience of a teacher explaining something to a slow student.
The beauty of quantum reflection is that it's cumulative, Admiral. The more you shoot at us, the more energy we collect.
And, eventually, we have to release that energy somewhere. 8 focused beams of concentrated destruction lanced out from the human ships, each one containing the collected firepower of the entire Zephyrian fleet. They struck 8 different targets with surgical precision, and 8 more Zephyrian warships simply ceased to exist.
The remaining vessels stopped firing immediately.
Now that we have your attention, Martinez continued conversationally, let me explain what's going to happen.
You're going to turn around and leave this system.
You're going to report to your superiors that humanity is not a species to be trifled with. And you're never going to threaten human colonies again.
Admiral Korthax found his voice. This is impossible. No species in galactic history has ever developed such technology.
No species in galactic history has ever had access to the combined knowledge of dozens of advanced civilizations while being completely outside their political influence, Martinez corrected. We took the best ideas from everyone and improved on them without having to worry about galactic patents, trade restrictions, or technology sharing agreements. She gestured to someone off-screen, and additional displays appeared showing technical readouts that made the Admiral's science officer gasp in recognition.
Altarian stellar engineering, enhanced with human quantum mechanics. Consortium environmental adaptation, combined with human materials science. Hivemind biological computing, merged with human artificial intelligence. We didn't just learn from you, we synthesized everything into something entirely new. The tactical display updated to show the true scope of the human defensive network. What had appeared to be 8 simple ships were actually 8 mobile platforms, each one surrounded by dozens of smaller defensive drones that had been completely invisible to Zephyrian sensors.
Your stealth technology,
Korthax began.
Borrowed from the Shadow Collective and improved, Martinez confirmed. Our ships can exist in multiple dimensional phases simultaneously.
You're not just fighting 8 vessels, Admiral.
You're fighting with 8 vessels and their escorts that exist partially outside normal spacetime.
The implications were staggering.
If humans could phase their ships in and out of normal space, then traditional military tactics were meaningless. They could attack from anywhere and disappear before retaliation was possible. Furthermore, Martinez continued, what you're seeing here is just our standard colonial defense force.
This isn't even our military. Not your military? The Admiral's voice came out as a croak. New Geneva is a civilian colony, Admiral. These are civilians in civilian ships using civilian defensive technology.
The Terran Federation Navy uses different equipment. The way she said it suggested that the difference between civilian and military technology was significant.
Korthax found himself wondering what weapons humanity might have developed if this was just their basic defensive capability.
I suggest you withdraw immediately, Martinez said. My fellow colonists are becoming nervous, and nervous humans tend to make unfortunate decisions. As if summoned by her words, the space around the Zephyrian fleet began to fill with additional contacts. Ships appeared out of nowhere as stealth fields dropped, revealing that the humans had surrounded the entire Imperial fleet without being detected. But these weren't military vessels. The identification signatures marked them as civilian freighters, mining ships, and even what appeared to be passenger liners. The colonists themselves had mobilized to defend their world. Sir, the tactical officer whispered, there are hundreds of them.
They came out of nowhere.
And each ship, despite its civilian designation, was showing energy signatures that matched the defensive capabilities they had just witnessed. Every human vessel, from the smallest transport to the largest cargo hauler, was apparently equipped with the same quantum reflection technology.
You armed your civilians?
Korthax asked in disbelief. We armed our ships, Martinez corrected.
In human space, every vessel is capable of defending itself and its neighbors. It's just common sense. The concept was foreign to Zephyrian thinking.
In their empire, military and civilian roles were strictly separated. The idea that ordinary citizens would be capable of defending themselves against a military fleet was almost incomprehensible. This is what happens when you give humans 50 years to prepare, Martinez explained.
We don't just build colonies, Admiral. We build communities.
And communities defend themselves.
The Admiral looked around his bridge at his remaining officers.
Professional soldiers all, they were trained for conquest and intimidation. But this situation was beyond their experience.
How do you conquer people who can turn your own weapons against you? How do you intimidate civilians who are better armed than your military? We're leaving, he announced finally.
Wise choice, Martinez agreed.
Safe travels, Admiral.
And, please give Emperor Vexthal a message from the Terran Federation.
What message?
Her smile was exactly the same as the one Ambassador Chen had worn in the council chambers.
Confident, satisfied, and slightly predatory.
Tell him that if he wants to test humanity's capabilities, he should come himself. But he should bring a much bigger fleet. The communication cut off, and Admiral Korthax stared at the empty screen for a long moment. Then, he turned to his navigation officer.
Set course for Imperial space. Maximum speed.
As the surviving Zephyrian ships began their retreat, none of them noticed the small, completely invisible probe that attached itself to the hull of the flagship. Within hours, it would be transmitting detailed intelligence about Imperial ship design, technology, and strategic capabilities back to human analysts. After all, if the Empire wanted to play this game, humanity intended to win it. Emperor Vexthal stood in his private war chamber, studying the holographic display that showed the aftermath of Admiral Korthax's defeat. The three-dimensional projection revealed the exact positions where 11 Zephyrian warships had been vaporized, marked now by slowly expanding debris fields that served as monuments to Imperial humiliation. The Emperor's personal advisor, General Sindar, shifted nervously beside him. In 1,000 years of Zephyrian expansion, they had never lost a single ship to a species they were attempting to conquer. The humans had destroyed 11 vessels without taking any damage themselves. "Explain to me how 8 human ships defeated 47 Imperial warships," Vexthal said, his voice carrying the dangerous calm that his subordinates had learned to fear. According to Admiral Korthax's report, Sindar began carefully, "The humans possess some form of energy reflection technology that turns our own weapons against us. Additionally, they demonstrated stealth capabilities that allowed them to position hundreds of vessels around our fleet without detection." The Emperor's crest flared. Hundreds of vessels? The intelligence report stated that human colonies maintained minimal defensive forces. The intelligence reports were based on observations made 37 years ago, Sindar reminded him. As the human ambassador pointed out, their capabilities have apparently advanced significantly since then. Vexthal turned away from the display, his massive form moving with predatory grace toward the chamber's tactical planning table. "Show me everything we know about current human technology." The table's surface lit up with data streams, but the information was sparse and outdated. Fusion drives that had been superseded decades ago, energy weapons that were now considered primitive, defensive systems that apparently bore no resemblance to what the Imperial fleet had encountered. "This is useless," the Emperor growled. "We're planning to fight an enemy we know nothing about." "Sir," Sindar said hesitantly, "perhaps we should consider diplomatic solutions. The humans have withdrawn from galactic society, and they're not actively threatening Imperial territory. We could simply ignore them." The suggestion earned him a look that could have melted hull plating. "The Zephyrian Empire does not ignore anyone. Every species in this galaxy either serves the Empire or serves as an example of what happens to those who resist." Vexthal moved to another section of the chamber where a massive stellar map displayed the current extent of Imperial territory. Red zones marked conquered systems, while smaller indicators showed species that had voluntarily submitted to Imperial rule rather than face military conquest. For 1,000 years, this strategy has been successful because every species understands that resistance is futile, the Emperor continued. "If we allow humanity to exist outside Imperial control, other species will begin to question our invincibility." The general nodded reluctantly. The Emperor was correct about the psychological aspect of Imperial rule. The Zephyrian Empire maintained control through the absolute certainty that rebellion was impossible. If humans could successfully defy the Empire, that certainty would be shattered. "What do you propose, Your Imperial Majesty?" "Full mobilization," Vexthal declared. "Assemble the Grand Fleet. If humans want to test our resolve, we'll show them the full might of the Empire." Sindar's eyes widened. The Grand Fleet was the Empire's ultimate weapon, comprising over 2,000 warships including the massive battleships that had been used to destroy entire civilizations. It had been assembled only 3 times in Imperial history, each time resulting in the complete annihilation of the target species. "Sir, mobilizing the Grand Fleet will require pulling vessels from across the Empire. It will leave our borders vulnerable and cost enormous resources." "The cost of allowing human defiance to continue will be higher," the Emperor replied firmly. "Send orders to all fleet commanders. I want every available warship assembled at the staging grounds within 30 standard days." As Sindar moved to implement the orders, Vexthal turned his attention back to the tactical displays. Somewhere in human space, the species that had dared to challenge Imperial authority was preparing for the war they had chosen. They would soon learn the difference between defeating a single Imperial fleet and facing the combined might of the Zephyrian Empire. Meanwhile, in a secure facility hidden within the asteroid belt of the Sol system, Admiral Elena Vasquez stood before a gathering of Earth's highest-ranking military officers. The chamber was carved directly into the rock of a massive asteroid, its walls lined with displays showing real-time intelligence from across human space. "Gentlemen, ladies, and beings," she began, addressing not only humans but also the few alien allies who had quietly joined humanity's cause over the years. Our intelligence networks have confirmed that the Zephyrian Empire is mobilizing for full-scale war against the Terran Federation. The assembled officers studied the data streaming across the displays. Satellite images showed massive shipyards across Imperial space working at maximum capacity, while communication intercepts revealed fleet movements on an unprecedented scale. "How long do we have?" asked General Morrison, the head of Terran Federation ground forces.
"Intelligence estimates between 25 and 35 days before they achieve full mobilization," Vasquez replied. "Emperor Vexthal is assembling what they call the Grand Fleet.
Over 2,000 warships, including their largest battleships."
A murmur ran through the assembled officers.
2,000 ships was a force capable of sterilizing entire star systems.
"What are our current defensive capabilities?" asked Admiral Chen, no relation to the ambassador but equally competent in her field. "All human colonies are now equipped with the quantum reflection defense grid," Vasquez reported.
"Additionally, we've completed deployment of the phase shift network across all inhabited systems." She gestured to a technician, who brought up a new display showing the defensive infrastructure that humanity had built in secret over the past decades. It was immediately clear that the Empire had vastly underestimated human preparations.
"The phase shift network allows our entire fleet to move instantaneously between any human systems," Vasquez explained.
"We can concentrate our forces anywhere they're needed within minutes, regardless of the actual distance involved."
"What about offensive capabilities?" asked Colonel Park from the Marine Corps. "Project Prometheus is operational," Vasquez said, and the mood in the room shifted noticeably. Everyone present knew about Prometheus, but hearing that it was actually ready for deployment was sobering. "Are we really prepared to use that?" General Morrison asked quietly. "If the Empire forces our hand, yes," Vasquez replied. "But it's a last resort.
The collateral damage would be significant." She moved to a different section of the display, showing human fleet dispositions across Federation space. Unlike the Empire's massive, heavily armed warships, human vessels were smaller, faster, and designed around completely different tactical principles. "Our strategy will focus on mobility and technological superiority rather than brute force," she continued. "Imperial ships are built for intimidation and overwhelming firepower.
Our vessels are built for precision and adaptability." Admiral Chan leaned forward. "What about their numbers?"
"Even with our advantages, 2,000 ships is a massive force."
"Numbers matter," Vasquez agreed.
"Which is why we won't be fighting them alone." The display updated to show new contacts appearing throughout human space. Ships that bore the markings of species that had supposedly been conquered by the Empire decades or centuries ago. "It turns out that the Empire's method of rule creates a lot of resentment," Vasquez explained. "Over the past 5 years, our diplomatic corps has been quietly making contact with resistance movements across Imperial space. Many supposedly conquered species have been waiting for an opportunity to rebel."
The implications were staggering. If multiple species rose up simultaneously while the Empire was focused on attacking humanity, the Zephyrian military would be spread thin across their entire territory.
"This is dangerous," Colonel Park observed.
"If we're caught coordinating with Imperial dissidents, it will justify any level of retaliation. The Empire already intends to destroy us completely," Vasquez pointed out. "We might as well give them a good reason." She called up another display, this one showing manufacturing facilities hidden throughout human space.
Massive automated shipyards, weapons factories, and research installations that had been built far from any galactic shipping lanes. "The truth is, we've been preparing for this war since the day we joined galactic civilization," she admitted. "Not because we wanted conflict, but because we recognized that our rapid expansion would eventually threaten established powers."
"How many ships can we field?" asked Admiral Chen. "Currently, the Federation Navy has approximately 800 frontline vessels operational, with another 300 coming online over the next month," Vasquez replied.
"But that doesn't include our civilian defense forces, which add another 2,000 armed vessels to our total strength." The numbers were impressive, but still fell short of the Empire's Grand Fleet. However, as the briefing continued, it became clear that humanity had advantages that went beyond simple ship counts. "Our vessels are equipped with technology that the Empire has never encountered," Vasquez explained. "Quantum entanglement communication systems that can't be jammed. Adaptive armor that becomes stronger when damaged. Weapons that exist partially outside normal spacetime. She brought up technical specifications that made several officers whistle in appreciation. Humanity had indeed learned from dozens of species, but they had combined and enhanced that knowledge in ways that created entirely new categories of technology. The real question, said General Morrison, is whether we're fighting to survive or fighting to win.
Admiral Vasquez was quiet for a moment, considering her words carefully.
The Empire believes this will be a war of conquest. They think they can force us back into their sphere of influence through overwhelming force. She turned to face the assembled officers directly.
They're wrong. This is a war of liberation.
Not just for humanity, but for every species that has suffered under Imperial rule.
When this is over, the galaxy will be a very different place. And, if we lose?
Colonel Park asked.
Then, at least we'll have shown the galaxy that the Empire can be hurt, Vasquez replied. But, I don't intend to lose.
The meeting concluded with detailed assignments for fleet deployments and coordination with resistance movements. As the officers filed out to return to their commands, Admiral Vasquez remained behind, studying the strategic displays. In 30 days, the largest fleet in galactic history would arrive in human space with the intention of destroying every human colony and ending the Terran Federation permanently. They would be met by a force that represented everything humanity had learned, built, and prepared over 5 decades of careful planning. It would be the most significant military engagement in galactic history, and its outcome would determine whether the galaxy continued under Imperial rule or entered a new age of freedom for all species. Admiral Vasquez smiled, the same confident expression that Ambassador Chen and Commodore Martinez had worn. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for 50 years. The Empire was about to learn why that preparation had been necessary. The Battle of Proxima Centauri began at exactly 0800 Galactic Standard Time, 31 days after Emperor Vexthal's declaration of war. The Imperial Grand Fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, 2,047 warships arranged in the classic Zephyrian battle configuration that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. Emperor Vexthal commanded from his personal flagship, the Eternal Dominion, a massive vessel that dwarfed even the largest human colonies. From his command throne, he watched as his fleet's sensors swept the Proxima system, searching for the human forces that would make their final stand. "Report," he commanded.
"Long-range sensors detect minimal human presence," his tactical officer announced. 12 vessels holding position near the primary colony world. No additional forces detected within the system.
The Emperor's mandibles clicked in satisfaction.
After mobilizing the largest military force in Imperial history, the humans had apparently chosen to make a token resistance before inevitable surrender. It was almost disappointing.
"Open a channel to the human vessels," he ordered. The main display showed the bridge of what appeared to be the human flagship. A woman in the uniform of a Federation admiral faced the screen with calm professionalism. Unlike the previous human officers the Empire had encountered, this one showed no signs of the mysterious confidence that had characterized earlier interactions.
"I am Emperor Vexthal of the Zephyrian Empire," he announced.
"You are facing the full might of the Imperial Grand Fleet.
Surrender now and your deaths will be swift."
The human admiral, who identified herself as Admiral Patricia Reeves, nodded slowly. "Your Imperial Majesty, I am authorized to offer the unconditional surrender of all human forces in this system." A cheer went up from the Imperial bridge crew. Finally, the humans were showing appropriate respect for Imperial power. "However," Admiral Reeves continued, "I'm afraid I need to inform you that you're in the wrong system."
Vexthal's crest flared in confusion.
"Explain yourself." "The Terran Federation capital was moved from Proxima Centauri 6 months ago," Reeves said calmly.
"This is now just a secondary agricultural colony. If you want to accept humanity's surrender, you'll need to proceed to the new capital system."
"Where?" the Emperor demanded. "New Terra, in the Wolf 359 system," Reeves replied.
"About 8 light-years from here. Admiral Vasquez is waiting for you there with the appropriate surrender documents."
The Emperor stared at the screen, trying to process this unexpected development. His intelligence had indicated that Proxima Centauri was humanity's most important colonial system, the obvious target for a decisive strike. "You moved your capital to avoid this battle?" he asked.
"Not to avoid the battle, Your Imperial Majesty," Reeves corrected.
"To ensure it happens in the right place." Before Vexthal could respond, his sensor officer called out an alarm. "Sir, massive hyperspace signatures detected.
Multiple fleets emerging from jump."
The tactical display updated to show new contacts appearing throughout the system.
But these weren't human ships.
The identification codes marked them as vessels belonging to species that had supposedly been conquered and integrated into the Empire decades ago.
Impossible, Vexthal whispered as he watched the display fill with rebellion fleets.
The Altarians, who had been among the first species conquered by the Empire. The Consortium, whose gas giant habitats had been seized 40 years ago.
The hive mind, whose organic technology had been appropriated by Imperial scientists.
And dozens of other species, all flying their original banners instead of Imperial colors.
Sir, the communications officer reported, were receiving transmissions from multiple species declaring their independence from the Empire.
Admiral Reeves' image was still on the main screen, and her expression had shifted to match the confident smile that seemed to be a universal human trait when dealing with the Empire.
You see, Your Imperial Majesty, she explained, while you were gathering your grand fleet to attack humanity, we were helping your conquered subjects remember what freedom feels like.
The scope of the rebellion was staggering. Species that had been under Imperial rule for centuries were simultaneously rising up across the galaxy, timed to coincide with the Empire's commitment of forces to attacking humanity.
Treachery, Vexthal snarled.
Justice, Reeves corrected. Every species in this system chose to rebel against Imperial rule. Humanity simply provided coordination and support.
Sir, the tactical officer called out urgently, energy signatures are off the charts. The rebel fleets are powering weapons systems. The Emperor quickly assessed the situation.
His grand fleet was formidable, but it was now outnumbered 3-1 by the combined rebel forces. Even worse, many of the rebel ships were using advanced human technology that made them far more dangerous than their original specifications suggested.
All ships, battle stations. Vexthal commanded. Engage all hostile forces.
The space around Proxima Centauri erupted into the largest battle in galactic history. Imperial warships opened fire on rebel fleets while trying to maintain formation against overwhelming numbers.
But the rebels weren't fighting like the scattered, desperate forces that the Empire usually faced.
They were fighting with coordinated tactics, advanced technology, and the fury of species that had suffered under Imperial oppression for generations.
Sir, the sensor officer reported, we're detecting phase shift signatures throughout the system. Additional human forces are arriving.
The 12 human ships that had initially been present suddenly became 60, then 200, as vessels phased into normal space from whatever dimension they had been hiding in. The human ships moved with impossible precision, appearing exactly where they were needed to support rebel forces or exploit weaknesses in Imperial formations.
How are they moving so fast? Vexthal demanded.
Unknown technology, his science officer replied.
They appear to be using some form of instantaneous transportation between points in space.
The battle raged for hours, but the outcome became clear relatively quickly. The Imperial Grand Fleet, despite its impressive size, had been designed to intimidate and overwhelm isolated targets. Against a coordinated resistance armed with technology that could neutralize their advantages, the Imperial ships were simply outmatched.
Sir, the tactical officer reported, we've lost over 40% of our forces. The remaining ships are requesting permission to retreat. Emperor Vexthal stared at the tactical display in disbelief.
His invincible Grand Fleet was being systematically destroyed by the very species he had conquered. The symbol of Imperial might was crumbling before his eyes.
Your Imperial Majesty, Admiral Reeves' voice cut through the chaos of the command bridge, I believe this would be an appropriate time to discuss surrender terms.
The Empire does not surrender.
Vexthal roared.
That's unfortunate, Reeves replied, because your fleet certainly is. As if summoned by her words, a new contact appeared on the sensors.
A single human ship, larger than anything they had encountered before, phased into space directly in front of the Imperial flagship.
What is that vessel? The Emperor demanded.
Unknown configuration, the science officer replied.
But, sir, the energy readings, it's generating more power than our entire remaining fleet combined. The newcomer opened a communication channel, and Admiral Elena Vesquez appeared on the screen. Unlike the other human officers the Empire had encountered, she wore the insignia of the Terran Federation's highest military rank.
Emperor Vexthal, she said formally, I am Admiral Elena Vesquez, commander of the Terran Federation Navy. I'm here to accept your surrender.
Never, the Emperor growled. Then, I'm afraid you leave me no choice but to demonstrate why resistance is futile, Vasquez replied, echoing the phrase the Empire had used to terrorize the galaxy for centuries. The human supership's weapons powered up with a sound that could be felt through the hull of the Imperial flagship. But, instead of firing, something else happened. Every Imperial ship in the system suddenly stopped moving. "What have you done?" Vexthal demanded. "Quantum stasis field," Vasquez explained. "Every Imperial vessel is now locked in place and unable to fire weapons, move, or communicate with other ships. You can consider this a demonstration of Project Prometheus." The implications were terrifying. If humans could immobilize entire fleets at will, then conventional military resistance was indeed futile. However, Vasquez continued, the Terran Federation isn't interested in conquest. We're interested in liberation. The stasis field released, and Imperial ships began to move again. But, instead of resuming the battle, many of them began standing down as their crews realized the hopelessness of their situation. "Here are our terms," Vasquez announced. "The Zephyrian Empire will immediately grant independence to all species that desire it. Imperial forces will withdraw to the original Zephyrian home system and surrounding territories. All conquered worlds will be returned to their original inhabitants." "And if we refuse?" Vexthal asked. "Then, we'll free every world ourselves," Vasquez replied simply. "But I think you'll find that accepting these terms voluntarily will be better for everyone involved." The Emperor looked around his command bridge at officers who had never experienced defeat before. They were looking to him for orders, but, for the first time in his life, Vexthal didn't know what to command. "You realize this will destroy the Empire," he said finally. "No," Vasquez corrected, "it will transform it. The Zephyrian people are welcome to join the new galactic community we're building. A community based on cooperation instead of conquest, on mutual benefit instead of subjugation." She gestured, and the display showed the current state of the battle. Imperial forces throughout the system were surrendering as rebel fleets accepted their capitulation with surprising mercy. "This is what the galaxy looks like when species are free to choose their own destinies," Vasquez explained. "Former enemies working together against oppression. Different species sharing technology and resources for mutual benefit. It's what galactic civilization could have been all along." Emperor Vexthal was silent for a long moment, watching as his 1,000-year empire crumbled around him. Finally, he spoke. "What guarantee do we have that this new order won't simply become another empire with humanity at its head?" "Because we don't want to rule anyone," Vasquez replied. "We want to go exploring. There's an entire galaxy out there, and, beyond it, other galaxies waiting to be discovered. Humanity's destiny lies in pushing the boundaries of known space, not in controlling what we've already found." She smiled, the same confident expression that had become humanity's trademark in galactic affairs. "Besides, we've learned that ruling an empire is much more work than joining a community." The Emperor made his decision. "I accept your terms." The formal surrender was signed aboard Admiral Vasquez's flagship, witnessed by representatives from dozens of newly liberated species. The Galactic Council was dissolved and replaced with a voluntary federation where membership was a choice rather than a requirement. And, throughout human space, colony worlds began launching new exploration fleets toward the unexplored regions beyond the galactic rim, carrying the hopes and dreams of a species that had always been meant to reach for the stars. In the end, the war that was supposed to destroy humanity had instead given birth to a new age of galactic freedom. The Empire had challenged the wrong species at the wrong time, and the galaxy would never be the same. Ambassador Sarah Chen, watching from Earth as the news of galactic liberation spread across all inhabited worlds, opened her desk drawer and filed away a manila folder marked Contingency Plans, Complete. Humanity had always been good at learning. Now, they were going to teach the galaxy what it meant to be free.